Well, I'm here talking with Sergeant Byron Fassett from Dallas about the sex trafficking trade, and he had mentioned about just the whole trafficking is much bigger than what we realize, that it's more domestic versus international. I'd like to just comment about that and explain the difference.
Before I really got into this, we hear a tremendous amount of information about sex trafficking, but generally what we were hearing was international. International sex trafficking, and rightfully so, but got a lot of attention. And like a lot of other people, not only in law enforcement across the country, I thought, okay, that was our problem. We don't have this in our own backyard. And I think there's a lot of contributing factors to that. One is we don't look at it. And we weren't looking at it as a community, as a country, because we don't have this problem. We're all too evolved to have this problem. And, those other, quote, places, they're the ones that have the problem. So let's go help them, poor them, so let's help them. And I think we do that because we don't want to acknowledge it here. Once we saw what to look for, it became evident that the problem is much bigger here. And if you just look at the economics of it, to bring an adult woman or child into this country, to track them into this country for this purpose, that costs a lot of money. When I can go right down the street and find a runaway, that costs me nothing. And when we really started looking at it, knowing what to look for, the numbers domestically shot up dramatically. I've been fortunate enough to go all over the world and look at and talk about this issue, whether it be India, whether it be Thailand. And I saw the same thing there, is every country has a bigger domestic problem than they do an international problem.
It's very interesting. I'd like for you to comment on what does a typical profile of someone trapped in this trafficking look like?
Well, oftentimes when we look at trafficking or look at sex trafficking, we think of adult women. The adult women had to start somewhere. And what I would tell you from my experience in dealing with this and literally talking to thousands of young girls and adult women is most of them start off as teenagers. Rarely does adult woman start off in this, simply because we understand the dynamics. The game, what the traffickers call it, they call it the game. And what they're going to is they're going to manipulate the person. They're going to con the person. They're going to convince the person that this is their choice to get involved in this. That's usually not going to work on a stable, normal adult woman. And so most of them actually start around the age of 14 to 15 years of age. And then they'll be into it up until their mid-20s. Like the FBI stats, they show that the average age is about 14 to 15, and the average lifespan is about 7 years. And my experience says the same, because it's an extremely tough life. It's 24/7. There's very little sleep. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of drugs. And so you don't last long when you get into it. A lot of these young girls and adult women, one of the things that we've learned, and it's helped us a lot in dealing with them, is that the prostitution or sex trafficking of women and children is a symptom. And for that victim, it's a symptom of prior physical and sexual abuse or some type of trauma that hasn't been dealt with or dealt with properly, which makes them very vulnerable. So most oftentimes they don't have that nuclear family, that cohesive family. They don't have a support mechanism to fall back on. And that's what the trafficker is going to prey upon. They want the ones, if you look at yourself, myself, our friends, our brothers or sisters, they have a family. If they have a problem, if they're in a crisis, they have some type of trauma, they can go to them. Most of our victims, what they have in common is they have some type of trauma. They have nowhere to go. They have nowhere to get, for lack of a better term, they have nobody to give them a hug. So what do? They go out on the streets. There's always going to be a trafficker. And what we say about pimps and traffickers, before they hurt you, they're going to help you. And that's a really important concept to understand. Before I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to help you. I'm going to seduce you through love, affection, and attention. And then once I've gained that trust, then I'm going to violate that trust and hurt you.
Knowing that, when you think of our church family, and we're spread all over Augusta, the CSRA, what are some things that you think that we can do to put to stop and be causal factors that could, if we can eliminate certain things that would lead these young adults into this industry, what would you suggest that we be part of?
Well, I think there's several ways. I think to really effectively deal with this It's not just a law enforcement problem, it's a community problem. And it has to have a total community response. Law enforcement we cannot arrest our way out of this problem. And so you have to attack it from several levels. One, prevention, but intervention. And those two kind of go hand in hand. And I think where a community, a church community, can really play a role in that, if we truly understand those dynamics, we move away from the myths. And what I mean by that is we move away from the traditional thoughts of what a person like this involved in this looks like. They're not going to be out there necessarily in the net hose, the high heels, the short shorts. They could very well be a young girl, 15 years of age, in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. But if you see them standing around waving by past cars going by, then that's probably what we have. So how do we impact it? How do we prevent it? How do we intervene once it's started? One, by understanding those dynamics. These are lost souls. They're the ones, they're looking for that love, affection, attention, looking for comfort. They're looking for security. They've had that trauma in their life. So what we can do as a community is that we can go out there and provide that. We can interrupt that pimp or that trafficker's ability to get to them. And there's several programs I think that can probably do that. The street outreach. Get the community, get the neighborhood, get everybody in. And then, let's show these people that we will welcome you, we will provide for you, we will assist you, we will show you another way. Because when I say they're lost souls, they've been convinced that there's no way out of this. One of the statements I make to a lot of young girls and women I deal with, easy in, hard out. And almost every time I say that, the tears start going down their face. And what I mean by that, it's so easy to get sucked into this, but so very hard. And most of them don't know how to get out. They don't know the way out. And what they need is somebody to shine a light to show them how to go down this extremely dark path on the way out. I think the first place we would start, I always tell everybody if I'm king for the day, what I would do, the first place I would start would be a community awareness. Let's get away from the myths. Let's get away from the shock value that people put out about this. Let's have a community awareness program through our churches. I think, when we have everybody in one place on a Sunday, let's take 5 or 10 minutes. Let's not use shock value, but let's talk about this in realistic terms, what's really going on out there. Let's do PSAs, let's do events. And once the community understands what's going on, we can change the community's perception of this. Because, this whole, we call it trafficking, but let's just break it down. This whole thing of prostitution, it's a dirty, ugly, nasty business that has a lot of negative connotation. I mean, if you just go back to biblical times, the worst thing you could call a woman would be a prostitute. That word in biblical times was used to basically say unclean, unhealthy, not worthy. And so that over time has carried that negative connotation. A lot of people think it's a choice. So I think we start educating ourselves first, then we reach out to our brothers and sisters out there that may be involved in this. We offer them a way out. We show them a way out. Are all going to take it? The answer is no. But if we start there, we start providing those opportunities for them to get out. We provide them ability that they can make money, make a living, have self-worth, not attached to this, then I think that's the way we help them get out.
I love how you said that, to be proactive, to help stop the turnout into this industry, that we become advocates for the people. We do programs, we do events that would draw them in, and then we love them big time.
Yes.
And I think it's kind of going to that mentality, and tell me if you agree, but it's changing the mindset, going from they're not offenders, but they're victims.
Yes.
And going after the victim and how we can help.
One of the problems we have, and that's one of the things we try to overcome with law enforcement, but our victims have this too. They have this very unique status of being a victim and an offender at the same time. And a lot of that is society perceptions, and our victims see it. Before we let them be a victim of sex trafficking, you have to be an offender and be engaging in prostitution. And we don't know what to do as a society. We know what to do with victims, and that's a person who comes before the system, says, I'm a victim, I want help, and I want to participate. We all as a society know what to do with an offender, that person who violates society norms and hurts people. We know what to do with that. But then we got this group of people, and they're the ones involved in sex trafficking. They have the unique status of being a victim offender, and it's like a no man's land of physical, psychological, and sexual abuse. And they don't know which way to go. And oftentimes they feel alone, they're on an island, and sometimes society says, hey, we're going to wait to see which side you go to. Well, realistically, without some help, they can't really move back to the victim side. So they migrate to the offender side, and which just keeps chipping away at their self-worth. And I think it's so important as a community, as a church, as a society, we have to be non-judgmental. One of the things I teach all my officers in Dallas is we accept all these victims for who they are and where they're at this point in their life. My wife and I have this discussion all the time, especially on the religious side. And I said, listen, we got to get them, they're at a negative here. We got to get them to zero. There's so much distrust, so much fear, and sometimes so much hatred in them that we've got to get them. My job, I look at as law enforcement, I got to go down and get them out of the negative. I bring them up to zero. But, when I get them to zero, I've got to go down and find the next one. And that's where I need the community, the churches, everybody to come up and get them and put our arms around them. And let's bring them up and help them merge back into society because they don't think they're worthy. They've been told they're not worthy either by their families, by society, by the traffickers. And so we got to show them that they are worthy. I got to tell you, as a cop, what has really, I know why I'm a police officer now working with them, because to watch that transformation take place and then merge back in society, for them to find their soul again, for them to come back, I got to tell you, that's it's priceless.
Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate your passion and just being an advocate for us to learn and grow, and for our community, that it's bigger than the sheriff's department. It actually takes all of us working together. I was fortunate, where I grew up, I lived in a very tight-knit church community, and that's all I knew. And then I look back at my life, that whole church community, I always tell people, I had like 20 mothers. If I messed up, everybody beat me on the way home. I lived in a church community that raised me. Well, why can't we be the community for these victims? It truly takes a village to raise this child or this adult. And if we come together as a community, as a church, as a society, on behalf of this victim, we can save the victim, and the perpetrator, the pimp, the John, the trick, they don't stand a chance. What are the indicators that you think of that makes a city a more potential for the sex trafficking?
What I tell everybody, a lot of cities don't think they have this problem. A lot of cities feel they might be above this problem. And my city felt that way. And what I would tell a city, if you have, and what I train officers on, who they don't believe their city has this problem, is that if you have runaways in or around your city, or if you have adult prostitution in or around your city, then you have child sex trafficking around your city. And a way the city can look at it is simply look, what does their street life look like? Do you have a lot of kids wandering the streets? Do you have a lot of truant kids? Do you have a lot of curfew violations? Then you're going to have this problem. I would tell you that every city in the country has it. A lot of them say they don't, and I would say let me come in there for a week or two. Just right here, I drive into Augusta. This is a beautiful place. And I was going, gosh, I don't see it. But, my problem is I've done it so long. When I was driving in last night at 11 o'clock, I started looking around. I said, oh, wow, they have this problem. They have this problem. And what I will do tomorrow is I went on the internet and started looking, and I can clearly see the problem. And so I think the way a community knows it has this problem is first we have to accept that we have the problem. And then once we accept it, then we have to decide, are we going to deal with it or not? And that comes down to that issue. Once you understand the problem, failure to take action at that point is nothing more than an excuse.
Wow. Well, Byron, I appreciate
thank you.
all the words, and I hope that this encourages our people here to do something.
Well, I want to thank you all for the proactive measure you've taken on this, because this is exactly what I'm talking about. You've got to get the word out to everybody, and it's not just a law enforcement problem, it's a community problem. And if we truly don't come together as a community, this will eat us up.
Thank you.